We worked 10 solid days, daylight to dark, no stopping. And then we take the next, 20 days off, and then we come back the following month and do another 10 days. And then we just do that however long it takes to bring her up online and get ready to do whatever the new owners wish to, do with the particular base itself. And whether it be, I think they're planning on living in it short term, which is always fun. This is the lower level of the Launch Control Center. This is where the 5-man launch group would have launched the missile. This particular half, you remember upstairs, there was the big column that goes behind that wall and then goes down. This would have been the side where all the radio gear would have been. The other side that is the new apartment for my wife and I when we're here. Our caretaker stays in this apartment. And then, of course, this area will become the new classroom with the bookshelves and things like that. The interactive displays that we're just trying to, from an educational standpoint. As for the silo, many people have asked, do we really plan on doing anything in there? No. It's one of the few in America that is naturally dry and has any structure in it. That entire silo itself has mounts every 90 degrees on the wall. It has struts and springs, and everything is suspended. Since we couldn't launch a missile from within the silo, what our engineers came up with was a roughly 40-foot tall, 4-story, better choice of words, a missile elevator that we called a launch platform to raise the Atlas F missile all the way to the surface and then launch the missile from the surface. And so in order to do that, the counterweights on that launch platform / elevator is nearly 1 million pounds. It's just tremendous with these things. The same thing was true with this structure that we call the Launch Control Center crib. This was suspended from 4 locations. In the ceiling, there are giant eye bolts that were kept connected to pneumatic struts. And so this entire structure floated, if you can imagine. This entire facility had a design criteria, could take nearly a 1 megaton hit within 1 mile and still launch its missile. Now, do I really think that's possible given that we use liquid oxygen as the oxidizer and had all of the accidents? Not in a million years. But perhaps it gave us that warm, fuzzy feeling that we needed to have and get us through the tough times. Because, at the end of the day, it's still debatable, did these first generation sites help in terms of avoiding conflict during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Well, I tend to believe they did. I know it's a very basic argument, but at the end of the day, we're still here. The former Soviet Union and their premier by the name of Nikita Khrushchev, they blinked. They backed down. A lot of it has been said that it could have been because of the 123 first generation ICBMs on top of second generation was already coming on. What we have seen is from the former Soviet Union is they did not realize that America, that we had all of this coming online. And so could that have helped in the overall deactivation, in Cuba and the missile pull for the medium and intermediate range ballistic missiles that the Soviets had on Cuban soil? Yes, at the end of the day. Just as a quick side note, my wife and I were in Cuba 2016 when it was first opened up, and just had a marvelous time. We interacted with the Cuban missile, the Cuban side of the museum for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I so badly wanted to shoot, the time I could walk, I so badly wanted to shoot the photographs of the intermediate and medium range ballistic missile sites, what was left. I've seen some of the pictures that the concrete igloos that were for the warheads were still intact and there. I wanted to see what else was still there. Obviously, the launchers are not going to be there, but the pads would be there. They're unless it was all just simply destroyed. My only problem is, maybe at some point, if as much as my wife and I would love to go back to Cuba and start that process, the problem that we're seeing is that it's so difficult when the amount of power is off for nearly 12 hours a day for the Cuban people, and it's just not a very good situation. And I think at that point, the other thing is, I don't know how it would make us feel. You're there and we're here, and they're watching us, and we're trying to not be a burden, and it's just not a good situation. I think is the easiest way to put that. Again, no politics, that's just a simple observation. I so badly wanted to go back 3 years ago in 2022 for the 60th anniversary. I thought that would really be something 60 years later, and I was there. But it was still, we just didn't think it was right, because these people are starving on the streets, and hell, we're coming in with money, and it just was not up. Not something to give you that warm, fuzzy feeling all over again. So we just declined. The other thing, though, is we are looking at different things like the intermediate range ballistic missiles that we had, the Thors in the United Kingdom, and we had the Jupiters that we had in Italy, and then we had 15 of them in Turkey. And we're talking about now putting together the group that goes over and shoots the photographs of what these sites look like. Because that is all built together with these in terms of first generation. Even though they are intermediate range ballistic missiles, they had up to about 1,800 miles of range. Nothing like the ICBM side here, which Atlas ultimately set the record at 9,000 miles. The Atlas Fs that were here were typically anywhere from, well, say 5,000 to 6,000. It would go, and depending upon where they began and where they were placed would dictate, of course, where those targets would be on the other side of the world. Any questions?
Sammy, what you got?
I don't know.
Well, you're good.
She's like a history buff.
Oh, good for you.
Well, so I guess my question's about this portion. So you have 3 apartments in here, you said?
Oh, no. Well, what we call an apartment, that's just the caretaker's unit.
Okay.
That's where the caretaker stays. Then my wife and I on the other side, when I say our apartment, that's just our area that's our personal space, where we stay when we're here. The entire upper level is yours, is the AirBNB apartment. And so that's the thing.
Okay.
And then this area right here, which you could say 1/4 of all of this space, is going to become the new classroom. So, yeah.
Very cool.
So nothing ever actually launched out of this, right?
No, sir. We didn't. Most of all the Vandenberg Air Force Base did most of the work on launching any of these first generation. Instead of launching them from the continental United States like we're here, the missile would be pulled, trucked to flown to Vandenberg, and then with the launch crew from here, and then launched there. That would be to check to make sure that the missiles were operational. They did work, but they weren't going to do that from any of the interior sites inside the United States. I think what they looked from is that if there was any issues, for example, like flying over Southern California might be an interesting problem if there was a mishap. Not to say there really would be, because these are ballistic missiles. These immediately go into outer space, and then they're put on a ballistic trajectory where it then follows that path to the target itself. But I think what they were looking at was just simply, enough for 2.5 years. And then, of course, We had a fourth Atlas F site blow up in May of 1964 outside of Altus, Oklahoma. And our former defense secretary, by the name of Robert S. McNamara, chose to shut down the first generation ICBM sites. And that would have then took place effectively January 1st, 65. They had already shut down, deactivated Atlas Ds, Series Ds, which were coffin launched, meaning they were above ground structures. The roof slid open and the missile was erected and then it was fired, but it was considered too vulnerable for a nearby strike. So its protection really wasn't that great, so it was chosen later. It had an earlier date for deactivation in 1964. But when the last Atlas F blew up, it was just so tough keeping them in silos and then keeping them on alert. That was the toughest thing. You know, we blow up 3 of them, we lost, 2 squadron commanders. I mean, back then the Strategic Air Command that was running, the overall show for our ICBMs in America were through the U.S. Air Force. I mean, if you have accidents, your career is over. Whether it's your fault or not, it may not sound right, but it's typically just the way it was. We just expect this to work. We expect it, And I think what they really found is a lot of good people were getting, fired until finally they took a closer look at what it was taking to keep these things on alert and the problems that they were having. And of course, I mean, if we're going to say one thing, it was the maintenance issues. To keep the bird on alert, I think, was a monumental task. The missile squadrons back then in the early 60s had the highest suicide rate in the United States military. These guys couldn't, the pressure was unbearable. I find that very, very hard to get my head around. And because I think in terms of, well, if you don't like your job, why don't you just go to your company commander and say, sir, this job sucks and I'd like a transfer. I want to, if I'm your commanding officer, I want to keep people that want to be here.
Yeah.
I don't want to force you here. To me, that doesn't make this thing work. But again, that's just my opinion. And a lot of good people were fired and ultimately were their careers over. Well, they really weren't promoted any further up the line, but I mean, our second squadron commander, our first squadron commander went on to do a whole different missile system. I think what it really came down to is the United States Air Force, through the Strategic Air Command, started to realize that, we've got really good people here, but we've got a real bear of a missile that we're trying to do all of these things to. And ultimately, when the Foresight blew up, it was just, and we already had second generation ICBM online. The Minuteman ones then were coming online from 1962 in October on. By 1963, we had the 54 Titan II sites. I mean, the 18 in Tucson, 18 in Wichita, Kansas, and 18 in Little Rock, Arkansas. I mean, yes, we had the first generation Titan 1s, the 54, those are the 3 launcher sites. I mean, there were lots of things, but I think at the end of the day, and, we had a difficult time here. Whether it was because our people weren't of the caliber to keep it going, we were the 5th, the 6th squadrons. It's kind of interesting that as for the other squadron in Oklahoma, none of the other 4 squadrons had an issue with their missiles, just us. So it begs kind of to ask, what did this squadron do differently that caused these problems versus the other ones? And again, I'm going back, basically between 1962 and the beginning of and the end of 1964. It's such a small period of time. And again, but it's my hobby, and really, well, more than my hobby, it's what I've done. I mean, And then when I went to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on these, in 1965, we didn't think about the environmental testing in these places. And so come the 90s, we started thinking about, hey, they are now in private hands, right? They're in the public's hands. We need to really go through and start doing some environmental testing. And it had never been done, never thought of really. And so I was part of the team here for the Albuquerque district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And that was our primary responsibility, was to get these sites, as many of the Walker sites that we call around Roswell, to go through the environmental testing. What's interesting is we're batting 1,000. All of the sites that we did are stellar. In fact, this site here that you're staying in, this is the first site in America to be given its certificate of reutilization by the government, and we're very, very proud of that. I mean, did it help that I worked for the Corps? Well, of course it did. But there's no way I could have made this place pass. Either it's going to pass or it's going to need remediation. And we just, again, did such a great job. And what's the real problem that we see in a lot of the other sites across America? Well, the typical chemical compound is called trichloroethylene. We used it forever as a degreaser, like during World War II. If I'm not mistaken, it's still being used in the US by the dry cleaning industry. If it's allowed to evaporate and go into the atmosphere, it's fine. However, if it gets into the ground, if it gets into the soil, it can contaminate water table and things like that. And so at that point, they come up with different plans for what is termed as remediation, and that is to bring them back into a level that is fit for, for humans, I suppose. Of those 72, how many are pretty bad? I'm going to say between probably close to a fourth are just not very, very good.
I would think radon would be an issue now.
No, believe it or not. I mean, really, honestly, more PCBs from the outside transformers that were used as just supplemental power. Through the years, people have shot holes in them, and of course, what's in the transformers is a chemical that was heavily with what biphenyls, I think is what PB stands for. What the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers did to all of our sites here, they went in and just removed 1 to 2 feet of soil and replaced it with new soil to just, we're not going to take a chance. It was, to me, it was a very positive way for us to engage, and we're going to do whatever it takes. And you still read about these. There are some sites that are just, I am going to tell you to run, don't walk. It is not one that you want to be on. But again, that's, that's much of the way the military is operated. We don't think in terms of, it's not like today. Today, when we deactivate a missile base, we destroy it. It's not, but we didn't have those treaties set up in 1965. So this is really, when you really look at what's the freebie out there that's not associated with any of this, it's really between, it's the first generation, it's about 123, 128 first generation sites. And honestly speaking, quite a few of those, again, almost 25% are contaminated. So, any questions?
So again, about like the living space and even the people who work here?
Sure.
Because I'm guessing like you need oxygen, and I know you have like the appliances upstairs. Like, how do you run all that being underground, but with like the and not like suffocate? I guess.
No, that's a good question. As you walked in, you saw two risers come up out of the ground, and on top of those were what we call ventilators. I call them whirlybirds. They're pushed by drafts by the wind. what they do is they create a negative pressure, and we have 3.5 million cubic feet of pre-cooled air in the silo. It brings it down and up the sides and out the 2-inch vents. We average about 5 to 6 air changes every hour. There's really not an issue of you're not going to go and can't breathe and die. It's not going to happen. The other thing is we don't use any gas or propane appliances. Everything is basically going to be electric, from like an induction cooktop, an induction toaster oven, a microwave, the refrigerators, the washer and dryer. It's an electric dryer. We've just now put in the new solar system in the last 90 days. We're working out now the placement for the added solar panels, but what we're finding interesting, we don't have any heating or cooling, as I said before, down here. Those 9 panels up there are running this whole place.
So that's where all the electricity is coming from.
It's all coming solar now. Even though I have not turned off the grid, and my rationale is, I would love to. I really would. Because 20 years ago when I put electricity in here and redid this site, just for power, I was charged nearly, $10,000 for those poles. And there's nothing I would rather do to say, we live in the land of the sun. I can say this about I did it. I mean, somebody asked me, how did I figure all of that out? Well, honestly speaking, I asked thousands of questions in over a 6-month period of time. I watched every YouTube video there was out there on how to put together solar. I then went to the manufacturers, compared all of it. I didn't want to get into this. I'm going to sell electricity back to the grid, not interested. Okay. I'm also not interested in the government subsidy. It's okay, y'all keep it. Personally, I don't want the strings. The other side of that was, though, I started. I don't have $10,000, and that's between the batteries. I have 6 server rack batteries, which are good for about 31,000 watts, and an inverter that will do 12,000 watts, and with the added solar, we'll pump it up to about 15,000 watts, which is far more than this place will ever take. So I have another 10 panels in the little red casita that's on the surface, and we're in the process of, when I'm doing work on different projects, that will become the new exterior place that people could stay if they don't want to stay here. Or this place is booked. That's what we typically find. We're coming off of now 25 straight days. So, and the last thing we want to do is for people that have booked well in advance is to go to you, hey, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cancel. And by God, we haven't had to do that yet. So, that we really try not to, because it's like you want to experience this, and we recognize that.
You're popular.
Well, and yeah, I'm not going to deny that. It's a lot of work for us. However, it's not hard given the amount of, we're not cheap. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But when you have the amount of money that my wife and I have in this process, that's a whole nother ballgame. So to me, that's what makes it to where, we can afford to pay ourselves back over a longer period of time. Because again, these things it's not that the materials are costly, it's the labor. It's just a labor nightmare. You're gonna do 10 times the amount of the labor side, because keep in mind, you gotta bring everything in And then if you got bad stuff, like, old sheetrock or whatever, you gotta get it out. And that's not always it's just like I bought a new TV. It's just like the box, we haven't done it yet. Number one, to get it in, you gotta bring in 2 people to bring it in. And granted, the whole box doesn't weigh all that much, but it's still a process. And, but more.
And then, so we talked about electricity. How about like water?
Okay, most missile bases get in trouble with water wells. We don't have any. We originally didn't have any. All of our water was provided from the Pecos River. If you came in from Roswell, you crossed the river and climbed a hill, where we're sitting up here on the cap, what we call the Cap Rock. We got our water from the river at that point. So, we do the same thing. I have a 300-gallon tank underground, and we have almost a little over 2,000 gallons on the surface. What will eventually happen is we'll collect rainwater. Rainwater will fill up.
So what do you have it delivered, the water?
No.
Ah.
Every time we go to town, we have portable tanks. I have a 125-gallon tank on the back. What you're not seeing are the trucks. We have an old Mazda 5-speed. I think it's a 78. And it hauls this little 125-gallon tank. And every time it's in town, it gets 125 gallons of water. And then when it comes back, for whatever reason, if we need groceries, supplies, in a matter, we always, if we are going to be in town, it's bringing back 125 gallons, and it's just a rotation. So it really doesn't cost anything. And I suppose we could have drilled a well, but doggone, I mean, they're so bloody expensive. And then up here on the Cap Rock, the bulk of them, the salinity content is pretty high. We didn't want to take a chance. So it was just like, why don't we eventually come up with a water system? We average about 8 to 10 inches of rain annually, which, if we had, say, 10 to 15,000 gallons worth of storage tanks, I mean, that would run us on an annual basis. And if we ever saw we were running low, we could also go and get it. Or, just like you said, I can pick up the phone and have a 3,000 or 8,000 gallon delivery, and But again, we just haven't had to do that, and I tend to like it that way. So it winds up. We have all the filtration. I mean, there's nothing. We're about to go to a commercial reverse osmosis system, so we'll, in essence, produce just a super quality water, and we can do almost 350 gallons a day. So that will probably be in the process too, is to even though we don't have any smog here, so it's really easy if we were to do a full rainwater catchment system. Probably be pretty easy. Would we still run it through a UV light and things like that to kill any bacteria that could be in there? Sure. But again, there's no harm running the water through a UV situation like that. And we also have it. And when you go to the silo, as you get close to the doors to the silo, if you look to the right, you'll see the jet pump that pressurizes the water. You'll hear it when it comes on. I mean, it'll wake the dead. I wish they had one that wasn't quite as loud. And then you'll see the 300-gallon tank that's there. And we use that as just, if we were to lose everything on the surface, we still have an extra 300 gallons. And believe it or not, we don't use, even with guests. I mean, and that's not telling you can't take a shower. It's none of that. I mean, do what you want to do, but it's just not. There's not a lot of water that's really used.
Yeah.
I mean, so. Any other question?
I don't think I have any more at the moment. Probably think of something when I'm looking at
Well,
the
if you
books
do,
and pictures.
just send me a message. I'm happy to. I mean, that's always the way it works because, I'm kind of putting you on the spot from the standpoint of, I run this all. You've never been to here, basically before. So here you're going to get all of this great stuff, and then, you're going to move forward from there.
Awesome.
The only thing I do want to ask you is that their back room is next to the table. My wife is going to show you that area. It's just to show you the way I did the petitions up there. I built this place as a soundstage. And my rationale was simply this. By building these fully enclosed rooms and all of those kind of things, I didn't want to run the risk that people would be claustrophobic. And so we really found that it works really well. Now that's not, of course, in the bathroom for privacy situations. There's a complete ceiling in there and there's all of that kind of stuff. But if you are in the back area, if you would please, when you leave the back area, if you will turn out the light. Also, we had some work done on the bathroom, your bathroom shower upstairs, and they reversed. The hot water is on the right instead of the left. It's on man electric, and I could scream that they did that. But anyway, I've got to bring them back out. And it's just a matter of switching the lines.
Yeah.
However, I want to let you know in case you get in there and you turn on the right and you're standing there waiting for it to get warm, and it's never going to get warm. And it is on demand, and again, it's electric on demand. Now, is it a pretty good draw? Yeah, it is, of electricity. However, we're in the process of changing out to a heat pump water heater, and we're going to experiment with it and see how it works for us. And the one thing that's nice if you come in with a lot of people, when you're dealing with on demand, it doesn't matter. It just keeps producing hot water, and that's the nice thing. It's not like a tank that you've got to then go back. And so many people. I came out of a very large house with 2 kids, and it was like I just never. By the time I got to take mine, there's never any hot water. So I just we're not doing that anymore. So.
Very cool.
Other than that, it's again, hey baby. Hey, they're ready, sweetheart.